We're here at the Museum of Nature and I'm with Michelle. Michelle is going to tell us all about this wonderful exhibit that's just opened today, and it's called the Devonian. Michelle, tell us about the name of this exhibition.
Right, so the exhibit is called Life Onto Land, the Devonian. So the exhibit is really exploring the Devonian period, which is a period of time that took place between 420 million years ago and 359 million years ago. And the Devonian period was a time of incredible dynamic change in terms of evolution and our understanding of the natural world today. So when we talk about life onto land, we're talking about the transition of vertebrate life from the sea onto the land, which is a transition that happened during the Devonian. So behind me here, life's first steps. That's very much what we're talking about. And we'll explore some of the other changes that took place during the Devonian, the creation of freshwater ecosystems, the colonization of plants onto the land. It was just a period of incredible change.
So let us walk around and you can explain some of these exhibits.
Absolutely. So I'll just briefly touch on the name, the Devonian period. It is actually named after the county of Devon in England. And this is because in the 19th century, amateur scientists in this area were taking a closer look at the marine rocks in Devon. And they were finding fossils that couldn't be placed in any other known time period. They had to create a new time period, which was then named after Devon County, the Devonian. So these very unique marine rocks that could only, at the time, had only been found there and were specific to a time that had not yet been defined. So as we enter our exhibit, first we start by kind of establishing some big ideas. So we talk about the geological history of the Earth. We talk about time in the billions and millions of years. Then, as we enter the exhibit, we have this fantastic interactive. This gentleman is Tetsudo. He's one of our paleobiologists here at the museum, and we've recreated for you his office. And so we've got wonderful touches of his personality, his love of baseball, for example, but also this interactive, through exploring, we're able to place ourselves in deep time. When did the Devonian take place? And it breaks it down here on the timeline. The Devonian took place in the Phanerozoic eon, in the Paleozoic era, and we are situated here between 420, 359 million years ago, the Devonian period. I'd also like to introduce you in here to a character that we're going to encounter throughout the exhibit. This is Pick. Pick is a rock hammer and Tetsudo's assistant, and he's going to crop up throughout the exhibit and break down big words, big terms, just so that our young visitors and the young at heart have, a good understanding of big ideas like evolution. When we talk about deep time, scientists divide time into eons, eras, periods. So eons are that largest chunk of time. Eras are defined by changes to the environment and to animal life, and then periods are defined by geological changes and specific fossil types. So the Devonian is defined because of the specific fossil types that we find from that time period. Over here, very important, this exhibit was produced in collaboration with the government of Nunavut. So the Museum of Nature is actually the steward of thousands of specimens from Nunavut. And we're holding on to those specimens only until a new heritage center is built in Iqaluit, at which point they will go home. So many of the fossils that we're going to be seeing are actually, we're able to show them today courtesy of the government of Nunavut, and we are just the temporary caretakers. So this is one of the reasons why we presented the exhibit in two Indigenous languages, Inuktitut and Inuinnaqtun. We wanted to make sure that the exhibit was accessible to the people of the land from where many of these fossils originated. So here, the geological map of Canada, each color represents a different time period, and a map like this would show our paleobiologists Where would be a good place to dig for Devonian fossils, for example? So in the case of our 2 dig sites that we feature in the exhibit, Anderson River in the Northwest Territories, Ellesmere Island in Iqaluit, they were identified as promising places to dig specifically for Devonian fossils by a map like this one. And this map was compiled by Natural Resources Canada. So here we talk about the Earth is always changing. This video here shows Ottawa, Anderson River in the Northwest Territories, and Ellesmere Island in Nunavut. And we see that during the Devonian, it's slowing down on the Devonian right now, these sites in the Arctic were actually located closer to the equator, right on the equator. So the Devonian was very temperate overall, and these Arctic sites were right on the shore of a vast temperate inland sea. So this is why we see so many marine fossils in particular in the Canadian Arctic, because during this period, those locales were right on the shore of that temperate sea. We speak to this here. The climate in the Arctic during the Devonian would have been warm and humid. So this animation is quite incredible, and it shows how the surface of the Earth has changed over billions of years, is always changing due to the movement of tectonic plates. And finally, we'll see that our sites in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut are now in the high Arctic.
Who do we have here?
We have a bowfin. He is an amazing living fossil species. So bowfins originated about 250 million years ago, and they've retained many of their original characteristics. So we call him, in pop culture, a living fossil. If he comes out, we'll see that he has a rounded caudal fin. That's a primitive feature that he shared with his very ancient ancestors. And he's a bimodal breather, which means that he can breathe both water and air. And that's a trait that he shares with early tetrapods, which we'll get to. So I hope he comes out. He's a little bit shy right now, but he's a beautiful fish.
It's amazing that he still exists today.
Absolutely, and around the corner we'll see some more ancient lineages that survived. So we're going to enter the Devonian now, and we have a focus here on marine life. So during the Devonian period, 85% of the Earth was water, and like I said, very temperate. And most of the life on Earth at the beginning of the Devonian was marine life. So you had invertebrates, corals, arthropods that dominated the seafloor, and then fish. The Devonian is called the Age of Fish because in the water there was this remarkable diversification, this explosion of diversity of fishes. You had, like you can see behind you, giant armored placoderms, incredible predators. You had lobe-finned fishes and the ancestors of modern sharks and ray-finned fishes all would have appeared during the Devonian. So under the water, life
flourished.
Absolutely. We have fossils of Devonian invertebrates, including corals. This is a sea star. Crinoids are in the same family. You have trilobites. And then here we have fossils of early fishes, including Euthenopteron here. And we're going to hear that name throughout the exhibit. Euthenopteron was a lobe-finned fish. Lobe-finned fish, the name comes from their paired fins, and inside their fleshy fins, the fins are supported by bone. And that graphic there might start to look familiar.
It does. It resembles a hand or a foot.
Absolutely. So lobe-finned fish had very limb-like bone structures in their fins. And as we'll determine over the course of the exhibit, lobe-finned fish are our ancestors. So these bone structures will eventually evolve to become our forelimbs. So lobe-finned fish and Euthenopteron are very important to this story. This is Dunkleosteus, a giant armored fish that could reach a length of 5 meters. It was a super predator at the top of the food chain and had one of the strongest bite force of any fish ever. So a fearsome predator. So this is showing when it came to fish and marine life during the Devonian, a very important jump in evolution occurred when fish evolved hinged jaws. So before this evolution, fish were jawless, and they basically fed from like the soup on the sea floor. They didn't have a lot of choice in terms of their lifestyle or what they were eating. But with the development of hinged jaws, they could develop new feeding behaviors that's what allowed them to diversify in large part. And eventually, those hinged jaws allowed them to become fierce predators. So this is actually a modern mako shark jaw. But that specific evolution of hinged jaws allowed fish to really thrive during this period. So now I'll turn us to the star of our exhibit. So we're leaving the sea and we're coming up into a swamp. So freshwater ecosystems. During the Devonian, freshwater ecosystems, stream ecosystems emerged. There was plant life that colonized stream banks and then would eventually move further inland. But this new habitat could then be explored, this new freshwater habitat.
So we moved from fish to apes to humans, or is there a question about that?
So this specimen you might have heard of is Tiktaalik roseae. And essentially in 2004, a group of paleobiologists traveled to the Canadian Arctic, and they were looking for a link between lobe-finned fish and their limb-like fin structures and tetrapods. Tetrapods are four-limbed vertebrates. We are tetrapods. All mammals are tetrapods. All birds are tetrapods. All amphibians, all reptiles are four-limbed vertebrates. They were looking for a link between lobe-finned fish and tetrapods to kind of explain that evolution from fin to limb. And they discovered on Ellesmere Island in Nunavut, Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik had half of the characteristics of a lobe-finned fish. It had fins and gills and scales, but also inside its fins had a shoulder girdle and a humerus and the partial wrist bones that were synonymous with mammalian limbs. So Tiktaalik is a transitional fossil, a link between lobe-finned fish and that came before and the tetrapods that came after. So it was an incredible find, an incredible specimen that changed our understanding of that evolution. So this right here is the holotype for Tiktaalik roseae. This is the specimen that defined the species. And all future discoveries of Tiktaalik fossils will be compared to this specimen. This is like the Mona Lisa of fossils. This is a very famous and very valuable fossil.
Very precious.
Absolutely. And then this is a model of Tiktaalik that was made by an American artist based on our most up-to-date understanding of Tiktaalik. So you can see that his shoulder structure and his hip structure would have allowed him to prop himself up out of the water. And the reasons for this transition onto land, there were a few reasons. He would want to avoid fearsome predators like Dunkleosteus, yes. Right? He would want to come up onto the land for novel food sources, and there was less competition. We also see just some interesting features, the flat head like an alligator or a crocodile, probably lay in the shallows with just his eyes poking up over the waterline to ambush prey, and just like our bowfin, was able to breathe both water and air. Very important for that transition. So this is an incredibly important specimen. Now, people ask, is it a missing link? And that's a tricky term that you see in pop culture a lot, but we have to remember that evolution is more like a tree than a straight line. This is an example of the transition onto land, of the transition from fin to limbs, but not necessarily our ancestor. We might have had an ancestor very much like Tiktaalik. So this is just one example of that transition. It would have happened multiple times in different locations at different times.
Yes, and if you look below the artist's rendition of water, you can see the two other limbs, and it has quite a large tail. So it could move very well through the water. Absolutely, and it probably didn't venture far onto land, probably more so on that, the shoreline. Exactly. But the tetrapods that followed
would then venture further and further onto land.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's a spectacular specimen. So here we're kind of showing this point that I made, that in lobe-finned fish, like Lacognathus and Euthenopteron, these are fossils from our collection, from the Nunavut collections. So here you have what's called a clathrum and a clavicle from Lacognathus, and we've indicated the same bones in our own human arm. So this story of fin to limb is our story as well. And then most developed of all is Tiktaalik here. This is his forelimb, and you can see that his bones essentially end in a partial wrist. And so our humerus, our bones, our ulna, the bones in our forelimb are echoed in Tiktaalik from
fin to limb.
It's our story, and it kind of blows my mind. So now we've moved from the swamp into the forest, and here we talk about the importance of plants during this period. So at the beginning of the Devonian, the plants would have been largely on the shoreline, but by the end of the Devonian, plants had colonized the land as well as our first vertebrates. And by the end of the Devonian, you started to see forests of tall trees, new land habitats. So the period that followed is called the Carboniferous. We have specimens here from the Carboniferous, and the Devonian laid the groundwork for these vast forests of the Carboniferous. So this evolution of plants from the water onto land is just as important as, life's first steps onto land. Arthropods like insects and bacteria were already there, but the first vertebrate steps. The Carboniferous that followed the Devonian, you see much more evidence of diverse land plants, which created more oxygen, which would then support the first reptiles and larger land life. This is a really interesting specimen. This is what we call a trackway, and this is a cast of footprints made by an ancient tetrapod. It would have been reptile-like. You can see the footprints, but also we can see evidence of its body drag. And these give us clues about how the earliest tetrapods would have moved their bodies. Around the corner, we'll see how we use fossils like this to inform even our understanding of modern biology. So in this section, we're leaving the Devonian now. We're coming back to modern times, and we're asking ourselves, why is this period so important? What do we study about it? And how does that inform our understanding of modern biology? This is Tetsudo, who we met in cartoon form earlier on. In 2023, he went with a team to Anderson River in the Northwest Territories to look for Devonian fish fossils, and they found 200 specimens.
My word.
So we have some of his specimens on display here. And what is truly remarkable, not only the quality of these specimens, but the fact that they are 20 to 30 million years older than other similar specimens from other parts of the world. So these changes were happening in the Canadian Arctic earlier than our previous understanding.
Quite a discovery.
Yes, yeah. So, and Tetsudo is here, so hopefully you'll get to speak to him. This is the research of master's student Eleanor Spence, who goes to Carleton. And essentially, what she is doing is she is creating modern trackways, the footprints of modern salamander species. So we can see in the plaster here, they're teeny tiny little footsteps. And using that as a model, these modern trackways, but she's comparing the way that salamanders walk and move to these fossilized footprints to ask the question, did early tetrapods move in a way that was similar to salamanders? So she's able to digitize these modern trackways and compare them to fossilized trackways to hopefully answer the question, how did these earliest tetrapods move their bodies? Because this story is the story of modern species, we can learn a lot about modern species from these ancient specimens. So this is more research by Tetsudo Miyashita, and essentially, in the video here you'll see, he and his students were able to breed zebrafish. Zebrafish are very small, about this big. They're a modern ray-finned fish. He basically bred zebrafish without their jaw hinge. Zebrafish feed by opening their mouths, creating pressure to pull food in. He created or bred zebrafish without a jaw hinge to mimic early jawless fish. And these zebrafish adapted and would feed more so by ram feeding. Their mouths were hanging open and they would swim directly into prey, but it created a model for how jawless fish might have fed in the Devonian Ocean.
Yes.
So you see the what we call the mutant zebrafish skull and the wild type zebrafish skull.
They would filter on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. They would kind of just slurp. You know, they couldn't create that pressure differential like to suck. They couldn't bite. They couldn't chew. So it created a living model of jawless fish.
That's very interesting.
That is our exhibit, Life Onto Land.
Thank you. And before we go, tell us about your T-shirt.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, so Tiktaalik is a very famous specimen, and he's actually featured in memes, meme culture online. And the idea is that because of this fishapod that came up out of the water, millions of years later, now I have to go to work on Monday. Now I have to pay taxes. Now I can't find parking. And it's all because of Tiktaalik. So this is my shirt that says he was a fool for ever coming up out of the water. Now look at all the problems I have in my day-to-day life. So quite tongue-in-cheek, but he's a very famous specimen and very prevalent in pop culture as well. Yeah.
I'd like to thank you very much, Michelle, for a wonderful explanation of this amazing visit. And it takes us so far back in time and more of the history of who we are and how we've become. So I thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for visiting.
Thank you.
Thank you.